Yo, hello. Can everybody hear me? I don't know. Is it on? You're
Yeah,
in the
you're
show.
clearly
Everybody
audible
can
and
see and hear
visible.
you. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody can hear me. My name is Roelof Temmingh. If you want to know how to pronounce Roelof, I always tell people to think of rule of thumb. Rule of thumb. So this would be rule of thumb, and then just take the thumb part away, and then you got the perfect pronunciation. So I just a little bit about myself. I studied electronic engineering. It was incredibly difficult. I don't know why I did that. It was a lot of work. I started a company called SensePost, which is now part of Orange Cyber Defense. There's still like the SensePost team within there. That was in 2000. And I also started Patarva in 2008. And Patarva was the company that built Multigo. And I ran the company for 10 years until 2018. In 2018, I exited the company. And for a year, I did not a lot. I painted and I cooked and I baked. And then I started Vortimo, and now we're doing a thing called Ubicron, which is the latest version of this. I'll talk a little bit about Ubicron going forward, but yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years. I counted the other day, and to my surprise, it is 30 years, which makes me officially old. And I've done 88 talks or trainings and workshops across 71 conferences in many cities in many countries. And I'm very glad that I can do this remotely. So it's great to be able to do it remotely. So yeah, my background is in IT security. I did a lot of pen testing. I ran the red team, the external pen testing team. I then did OSINT software. And I also spent quite a bit of time looking at influence operations and disinformation, looking at attribution for those kind of things using OSINT, which kind of led me to Ubicron and stuff. So that's who I am, right? Now, can we go to the next slide? Let's see. Yeah, we can. So today, what are we talking about today? Today, we're talking about time stamping the web. And I think it's a really interesting talk, to be honest. This has been changing a lot in the last couple of days. So literally, some of the tech that you'll see here is stuff that we worked on this morning. It's 5 p.m. here in South Africa. So literally this morning, we were still doing some of the stuff. So timestamping the web, meaning when was something made? And I thought it would be pertinent to mention that this presentation was made in October and November today of 2025. Right. So what is it that we want to try to do? Sorry, I just want to go one back. I've never presented this anyway, so I don't know how long this presentation is going to be. We might be a little short, we might be long. Let's see. Okay, so what is it that we want to do here, right? We want to get temporal information about a web page. Specifically, when was this web page created? And when was this web page modified? And you'll see as we go along, this is actually a difficult question to answer. Now, why would we want to know this? So we want to know this because in certain situations, it's really, really useful to know when a web page was created. Because we cannot claim that something was published or put on the internet before it was created, right? So at the bottom, you'll see there's a timeline, and there's a red part on the left-hand side, which we cannot claim that it was created there. And there's a green side. Obviously, after the fact, we can say, well, you just didn't see it on the internet. So for instance, if we say we reported something, we reported on something a long time ago, And I can see that the page that this report or news article was on was created last week, then you are lying to me, right? You cannot claim that it existed before last week. You cannot say that it was created a year ago. And so in certain situations, it's really useful to be able to timestamp a web page. And this project really came about when someone asked me specifically to look into that. And I was like, oh, I don't think this is like timestamping a web page. It's difficult, right? And I started looking into it. And the more I started looking into it, the more I started seeing that we have options. And so this is what I want to talk about today. If you look at about pages, for instance, this is typically also interesting for us. A company has investors or they have people working for them. And I want to be able to say, can we have an idea of when these people joined this company? I have a whole lot of list of people. Do I know when they joined the company? Can I have an idea of a temporal analysis of this page to be able to answer something like this? And you'll see that we actually can do that, right? In the demo. So there's going to be a demo of this, obviously, as well. Okay, so for the purpose of this talk, and I think this is very important for me, for the purpose of this talk, we are only interested in when something happens, right? So we're not interested in who or how or why or any of the other OSINT kind of things that I normally do. Like I do these things on a daily basis, but for this particular talk, we are only interested in when, right? So when you see something and you go, yeah, but you can get a lot more information about it, then I will ask you, is it temporal information? Is it time-based information? And if it's not, then I'm not interested in it. For this talk, I'm obviously interested in it, but for this talk, it's only about when. Okay, now, there's a difference between what we call the meta information of a page, and the page itself. So think about it as like buying a car, right? So when you buy a car, someone can tell you something about the car. They can write anything on the window of the car and say, this is a car that was from this model and it's from this year. But it doesn't mean that the car is really like that or that old or, has that engine or something like that in there. So in other words, a page could say, have a like text on the screen of the web page that says this page was created on a certain date, but really the page could be created anytime. And I could just edit the page to look at it. So we're not looking at what you tell us when a page was created. We're looking at when we can determine from the assets and the metadata when a page was created, right? And so again, for the purpose of this talk, I don't care about the content that is rendered on the screen because, like I say, people can make up, stuff. We care about the meta content. So we care about not what's written on the screen. We will look at what's written on the screen as well, and we parse that out as well. But it's like very secondary to the asset classification that we're going to have, right? So remember that. So A, we're looking at when, and B, we are not looking at what people write on the screen, on the page. We're looking at what is inside of the page, right? Okay, so I think it's pertinent that we understand how web pages are kind of made like modern web pages. And this has changed a lot because in the past, you could have a page that you edit with an editor, with a VI, and you'd be like, well, write the page in HTML yourself, and you press enter, you press escape, :Q, WQ, exclamation if you're using VI, and then you would save the page, and then that would be the thing. But pages today doesn't look like that anymore. Now, let's see what a page or how does a page look? So we have a combination of many kind of assets that make up a page. And mainly, you'll find that it is these four things. It's HTML, it's CSS, which is your style sheets, it's JavaScript, and then there's like images, like tons and tons of little images, which could be PNGs or JPEGs or WebP, or maybe there's video, MP4, SVGs, which is vector, icons. There's a lot of things that make up the image part of it, but mostly it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that makes up this page. Now, if you look at a car, the analogy of a car rarely is manufactured entirely in one factory. They would buy, let's say, I don't know cars at all, but let's say they would buy like the chain of the thing over here, and they would buy a radiator from here, and they would put it together, and not all of the parts are manufactured at the factory. In the same way that a watch, when you buy a watch, is not always manufactured in one place. And the same thing goes for web pages. So you have a web server that's hosting your content, right? But all of the assets are hosted on other places, like they're sitting on CDNs, which is a content distribution network, which basically means that if I'm requesting an image, let's say from the server, it's trying to distribute that image to a server that is close to me, and so that the download of this image and the page itself is really fast, right? That's what a CDN does. And so this page is made up of assets that are sitting on different places. And this is kind of where the analogy with a car breaks down, because a car, when you have a car, you have a part, it doesn't sit somewhere else. We are not having a remote radiator or a remote engine. It's all in one place, right? So I made a picture. I will tell you that I made this picture with ChatGPT. And so that's why the radiator sits on the roof. I'm not going to lie. I know that the radiator is not there, right? But I mean, it kind of shows the point, right? So you have a whole lot of things. It gets, and like here on the side, you'll see, here's your web server. That's the only thing that's really your web server. Your images might come from AWS S3, and it might come from Cloudflare and Google CDNs and things like this. I want to see if someone is sending me a message from the staff, or if this is unrelated. It is unrelated. Okay. So now, remember, we're looking at time-based stuff, right? So when you let's say you're an expert with cars. I'm not an expert with cars, but let's say you're a real expert with a car, and you take the car apart. You might say, this radiator is a Honda radiator. And I know that this radiator, it came from 2011, and the gearbox is actually it says this, but it's really a Toyota, right? And it came out in this date, and the door has a stamp that says 2019, and the chassis has a VIN number. And when you look up that VIN number in some kind of a database, you'll see that it says 2020. So now I ask you, when was the car made? Well, okay, the car was made in 2020, I guess, because that's the last date that we have. But it has parts that come all the way from 2011, right, in this case. So it's hard to say, because it's not one thing. And the same thing is like a web page. A web page is not just one thing. It's a lot of things, right? So, and the difference also between a web page and a car is, once you have the car, it's there, you can't change it. But I can change these pages, and when I modify the page, it might now have assets that's from a different date. And this makes it really difficult to do all of these things, right? Okay, so someone asked me, they said, this is a conversation went like this. They said, when did this image appear on the net? And I go, I have many questions about this question that you have, right? And they said, you always talk a lot and you always make it difficult. Just give me the answer. And now think about what it is that you're asking, okay? So if it's an image, we're now talking about an image, right? So are you asking me, let's assume it's a photo, right? So are you asking me when we took the photo? Maybe. So when it was created. And then I took the photo and I put it into Photoshop and I changed it. So now there's a modified date on the photo, which means is that the time when you say this thing appeared? Well, no. So, or would it be when that thing was put inside of a web page? And was it when the web page was published? So when I created the web page, page.html, and I link the image to this thing and I save the file, is that when the image appears on the internet? Well, you can argue that if that page is unlinked, so it's not linked to anywhere within the internet, then doesn't really exist, right? Okay, so let's say is when it was linked, but is the page new? Or was it a page that was already there that I edited and I added the image in there right now? And all of these things have different answers, and all of these things answers different things about the page, right? You can also argue that even if the page is linked and it's there on the server, it doesn't really appear on the internet until someone sees it. So who's going to see it? So when Google indexed it, when the Wayback Machine seen it, when you've seen it, does it then mean that the thing appeared on the internet? So it's a very complex, but it's a very difficult question, and we need to know what it is that we're asking when we ask a question like that, right? Okay, so now we're going to get a little bit more technical. So let's just look at all of the different layers that we have, right? So the first thing that we have, if we look at this URL, is we have the domain and we have the DNS name. And the domain and the DNS name, those are not the same thing. You might say it is, but we can have a really long conversation about the fact that one thing has whose information and the other thing doesn't. A DNS name doesn't have whose information and a domain does. So in this case, a domain would be site.com and the DNS name would be www.site.com, right? And that's mostly static. It means when I register a domain, I don't change the domain every day, right? It's mostly static, and the DNS is mostly static as well. And then we have the server that's actually serving the page up, right? And that's a little bit more dynamic. We'll look into that. And then eventually, when you look at the yellow part there, that's the actual page that gets rendered. And that's really dynamic, right? Because it might change every day. It might stay the same, but in cases of new sites and things like this, this is very dynamic, right? So let's see what we can do with this part, right? So with this part, we start with the domain. So obviously the domain has to be created, and the website, the page, this /page.html cannot exist when the domain doesn't exist, right? So we're starting from the very beginning. So the domain is, we can look up from historical whos records, we can look up when a domain was registered. But you got to be careful with this because domains these days change a lot of ownership. So you could say, well, the domain was registered in 2000, long time ago, and it stays the same. And then all of a sudden there's a change in the registrar information in 2023, which means the domain was transferred. And again, you would know this, all of these things are anonymous, right? So you don't see when it was, you don't see that it was transferred not to the same person, could be in the same person, but they're now using a different registrar. So that becomes tricky, but it gives you a kind of indication. Someone can't tell you, we published this thing in 2020, if the domain was registered in 2021. That's an easy no, right? So it gives you like this vague, big area that you can look into. The second thing is there needs to be a DNS name for that thing. So you would say, immediately you would say, well, that's the same thing as the domain, but it's not really, because imagine this page was served from a machine called webserver.site.com, right? So when first did we see that DNS name in passive DNS, right? So we have all of these listeners on the internet that basically mop up all of this DNS information and lookups that come along, right? And they keep track of when this thing was first seen. So it gives us like also this little date that says this page couldn't be served from webserver.site.com before that time. There's also providers that provide NetFlow information, which is really cool if you have access to it. And so you would see it in those in that NetFlow information as well. Okay. Now we're moving to the server. So the server has a certificate. Most of the internet these days run on HTTPS, right? So most of them uses a certificate. And the certificate has obviously a valid to date, so valid from and a valid to date. But normally what you see these days, because everything nowadays is let's encrypt, right? So there's like this 3-month kind of period where the certificate was valid for. But we have a lot of sites like Sensors, like Shodan, that look at the certificate information and remembers that certificate information. And I can actually show you what it looks like. So I'm going to quickly jump to, I'm going to jump to this screen, right? And here you can see I'm on a site called crt.sh, right? I don't know if you could see it there. Let me just do it live. And I can look up any domain here. So let's say ubicron.com, press enter. And it will basically tell me when it's seen certificates for it, for ubicron.com, right? And it will tell you what the name was. So if you're into pen testing, this is a really nice way to do enumeration on the domain. You'll see we have a machine called Joe. And the oldest one that we have here is 2024-8, right? So it gives me a kind of idea when this domain was actually created, right? And if we look at a machine, we can say www.ubicron.com, and we'll get like specifically the SSL certificate history of that particular site. And it gives us a nice cutoff date, right? Okay, so when was the first certificate issued? Like you cannot claim that the site was there before then. You can kind of claim that it was running over HTTP and not HTTPS, but I'm not going to believe you, right? We can look at the HTTP header. So last modified time, it just doesn't work. I think it's a really bad idea. That's why I put in the word "dir" there, because I think it's a bad idea, right? Now, the first place that you would want to go to for this is archive.org, like the Wayback Machine, right? So the Wayback Machine would say, we basically go around, we index the internet, we keep it, and you could look at a web page back in time, right? I can show you what it looks like because I have it right here. This is the Wayback Machine for patarva.com. Let me zoom in a bit. And you can literally say, well, when was the first time that we saw this thing? It was in 2007. And in fact, if you want to, you can click on a date and you can see what the site looked like in that time. And for other purposes, that's super useful, right? For looking at about information, contact information. That's super powerful thing to see in that time. So it's a really nice project. Let me see. This is doing a couple of redirects here. I know that we did like this. So if you want to see what our website looked like in 2012, no judging. I mean, it was 2012, right? Okay, so now the problem with the Wayback Machine is like it doesn't index all the time. It indexes kind of when they get to it or when you ask them to get to it. So you could see there's like a big, let's just look at it here. There's like a lot of like missing data over there. So it's not a reliable way of doing it, right? It doesn't tell me exactly. It gives me like a very wide kind of range that I can look into. And this is all these, that what I was talking about now is all the services that we're going to talk about. That's external services that you can look at, because all of these things are, you look it up in passive DNS, or you look it up in historical whois, or you look it up on certificate history. It's all related to services out there. That's not the site itself, right? And now we're going to start looking at the page itself, like what is on the page itself, right? So the first thing we're going to look at is meta tags. And this is kind of straightforward. A long time ago, people said, hey, let's put these tags on pages so that it can be indexed better, and that you can see this is from, at the top, that's from ChatGPT. They describe the presentation metadata, social showing, crawler hints. They passed heuristically, not semantically. Okay, so they all have different keys. But what you will see a lot is that there are dates embedded within these meta tags, right? And I've showed you there at the bottom that you will see that there's a published date and a modified date that you will find on pages. You won't find it every page, but you find it on surprisingly many pages. The second thing, and this is very close to this, it's not entirely the same, but it's very close to it, right, is schema.org entries that you see on pages. And specifically, if you're looking at any page that is kind of new, then those pages would have this in, because the software that creates the page tries to optimize it for SEO and automatically inserts the schema.org entries within the page, right? Because the crawlers and the indexing doesn't even look at the page, it just goes straight for this nicely JSON formatted text that sits within the page, and it gets all the information off there. And it's not just the time information that's there that's interesting. There's other interesting information as well within the schema.org portion of the page. Again, it's optional. It doesn't mean you have to put it in, but many pages have it in. And you will see here, for instance, in this example, what I think is interesting about this is the date published in this thing is 2012, and the date modified is 2024. 2020 and 2024. And that's a pretty nice, big kind of like a range of time that we're looking at, right? So it means that the date published will always stay the same, but as soon as I change the page, then the software that I'm creating the page with will automatically update the date modified. And so I always just get the last date in there. Of course, we can parse it out here and we can see what's going on. The third thing we can look into are comments that we find within HTML and scripts. And you're going to think, well, how many times are you going to see this in a script or in HTML? And I can tell you that it's the answer is a lot. You see it a lot more than you anticipate. So we're not parsing the actual text of the page, but we're parsing comments from this, and we're parsing things that sit within JavaScript, for instance. You could see there is at the bottom, you'll see there's a thing that says created at, and it gives me the exact time that this thing was created at, right? The top is actually from all Webflow sites that was created with Webflow. Inserts within the page the last edited date of the page, which is fantastic, right? So it gives it in human readable form, and it's right there. So we could parse this out as well. And now you can start seeing that, hey, there's actually quite a few things we can look into. The next thing is URLs and parameters, right? So anyone that's built a site within WordPress knows that when you upload a image or you upload an asset to the WordPress site and you actually look at it, you'll see that it sits within uploads/year/month. And so now all of a sudden we have a way to basically timestamp that particular asset, to say that picture was uploaded in this month of this year. And you think that, okay, well, year and a month is not really a good resolution, but some of the other programs that build websites have a much cleaner resolution. Like you see at the bottom, you'd see there, that particular one gives me the time, the date, the hour, the minute, and the second that particular picture was uploaded. And so when the picture was uploaded in that time, we can say, well, maybe the page was changed at that time. So it's a really good hint of when that page was at least modified, right? Okay, everybody's still following. It's kind of weird. I'm talking to my camera, and we're gonna see how this works. I'm hoping there's people actually watching this. Okay, the next thing we want to look at is EXIF, and everybody would be like, "Yeah, you should look at EXIF." So if someone says EXIF and they talk about all the metadata that's within images, then you know that they're old, like me. And actually, I was always talking about EXIF, EXIF, EXIF. And the reason why I was doing it is because EXIF standard came out in 1995, right? You'll see it here as a little table. Came out in 1995, which is when I just came out of university, right? And it's actually not just EXIF. There's XMP, and you can see that was introduced in 2001. Right, and XMP is a little bit different from EXIF because with EXIF, that is basically created from the thing that takes the picture. But XMP is a standard that changes based on when it was modified or when it was edited, and XMP comes from Adobe, right? So you'll see it's a little bit different. And then we have something like it's called IPTS, and it stands for International Press Telecommunication Council Metadata. Was introduced in 1990, but it was never used until 2005. And so all of these things basically insert information within a picture, right? That is not in the picture itself, but it is in the file. And as soon as you look at the file, and as soon as you have the file, you can extract that information from the file itself. Now, there's even other formats that I didn't even know about, right? Called ICC, T-text, I-text, Z-text, all those things are metadata formats for PNGs. So there's actually a lot there. It's not just EXIF, right? And all of these things can contain their own kind of data, and we can decide that we want to put date stamps within that data, right? Now, what happens when you actually upload a file like that, right? So when I upload a file like that to a social network, it gets scrubbed. And I've made a list here of all the major social networks, and if the EXIF data gets scrubbed from images. And you can see that everyone scrubs it, right? When I joined the call, the previous speaker was asked the same question, and he had the same answer, and it gets scrubbed from every social network. There's a couple here at the other side where it doesn't get scrubbed, but it's not really social networks because this is like Google Photos, Apple iCloud Photos, Dropbox. Those are not really social networks, right? All the rest, they would clean out the EXIF data, they would clean out the ICC data, they would clean out the XMP data, and you would not see it. Although I've seen in the past on platforms like Facebook that some of the data doesn't get scrubbed out. It's not super useful, but I've seen bylines, for instance, that doesn't get scrubbed out of XMP on Facebook. And what's interesting with Facebook, if I remember correctly, is they actually insert their own metadata within the pictures that is identifiers, so that when you take that picture and you copy it from Facebook onto a website and they index that website, they can actually know that that picture comes from Facebook, and internal to Facebook or to Meta, they can basically determine which profile that linked to. So they can link that website then to that profile, which is pretty interesting. I kind of forgot about it, but I remembered it now when I did this talk. But the thing that's interesting is that CDNs don't remove EXIF from images. When I say EXIF, let's say metadata from images, which means that if I upload an image on, let's say, WordPress, and I put it on the site, then it's not going to be scrubbed of EXIF information by WordPress. And it's not going to be scrubbed by Webflow. And it's not going to be scrubbed by any of these things, right? So when I create a page itself that's not part of a social network or something, then the image that's on that page can still contain good metadata from the images. And we're going to see how that looks like. Now, for instance, here's an example. This picture that says osintool.com over here, OSINT brought to you by OSINT tool. It's something that I created myself, right? And it's on my website, okay? And when I run XMP, EXIF, ICC, all of those things that scrape the image for information, I get this information here, right? I get a thing that says there's a create date on here, which is interesting for me, right? And I also get a thing that says this was created by Adobe Photoshop 21.2. Now, what's interesting about this is I can find out when Adobe Photoshop 21.2 was created. And it was created in June 16, 2020, which means this seems okay, right? So even if the create date wasn't there, if I know the tool and the version, I can timestamp the version and I at least know that that image wasn't created before that time, right? And in some cases, you even get a whole history of when the image was edited and anything was done with the image, right? So this is kind of important to us as well. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is Unix timestamps. And this is super interesting. And that's kind of when I decided, okay, we can make this thing a talk. Because then it started getting interesting, right? So you would look at a piece of text here at the bottom, right? And it would look like this. And it would just say something, something, upload, V, and a number. And then there's a random thing. And now that's a JPEG. I was like, what is this thing? What is this thing? And if you start looking at this, you'll notice that many of these things have either 10 or 13 digits next to it. It's 10 or 13 digits long. And I was like, what happens if I take this thing here, and I just make it a Unix timestamp? Now, what is a Unix timestamp? So Unix timestamp is a thing that we use in programming, right, to basically look at a time, and we count the seconds from 1970. From the 1st of January, 1970, we start counting seconds. And this, you can see it's a long number, so that's how many seconds passed since the 1st of January, 1970. So this isn't really just a number. This thing is actually a time. So this shows us a time. And you get a lot of these conversion tools that you basically just put the timestamp in there, you click on the button, and it will tell you exactly when it was. Now, there's two types of this. There's a 13 and a 10 type on this. And the 13 is 3 digits longer, and it basically gives us milliseconds as well. So we can timestamp a thing up to milliseconds, exactly, if we got 13 things in there. So we can build a thing that basically look through all of the source and then determine, is this a timestamp and is it Unix timestamp, and then we convert it. That's just a parsing function, right? And that's kind of when I thought, this is going to be cool, right? This is going to be cool. And we find this everywhere. You will see when I demo it, we absolutely find it everywhere, right? And then because I found this thing, I started saying, well, maybe there's other things as well that actually can do these kind of like, that holds this kind of information. And the next thing I knew, I was looking at this page and I'm like, what is that thing? And to be honest, I took it into ChatGPT and I was like, what is this? And can I timestamp it? And you know what? It said straight away, it's like 100%. This is a MongoDB object ID. And you can basically just reverse it and get a timestamp. And I was like, man, this is the coolest thing ever, right? And you get a tool that can do it for you. There, it's on the right. And so when you put that number in there, you basically get a timestamp that when that particular PNG was uploaded. And because there's two numbers in there, you'll see there's two numbers in there. It's actually interesting. The first number is when the site was created, and the second number is when when this particular PNG was uploaded, right? So not only do I know when this particular image was uploaded, but I also know when the site was created. And so again, I can build a parser that basically parses this entire page and basically look for these object IDs, right? Now, it goes more crazy, right? And these are things that I didn't implement, and I'll show you why. There's a thing called snowflake IDs, right? And it's kind of the same as like a Unix timestamp, right? But it's like put together with like different bits. 41 bits is the timestamp. Then there's a data center ID, a machine ID, and a sequence number. When I saw the machine ID, I was really excited. I was like, does this mean I can basically see images coming from the same machine? Because that would be crazy, right? But it's not. It's actually the machine that's serving the information, not the machine that posts the information, right? Now, the reason why snowflakes are kind of like less interesting to us is because every provider has its own epoch time. Like, you know, when you remember we count from 1970. So these guys count from different things. Like here we go. Twitter counts from 2010. I don't have my glasses on. Discord's counting from 2015. Instagram. And so all these things have like different epoch times, birth dates, right? And so we can build a thing that basically look for snowflake IDs, decode it, look at what site they're on, based on the site, knows what the epoch time is of the site, and then decode this thing to a date and a time. And it works, right? So when we look at this is on Twitter. Twitter uses snowflake IDs as well. You would see that, you know, Votimo joined January 2019, but February 2019. It doesn't show us when it joined in 2019. But when you look at it, you'll see that there's a string, an ID string, right? And you see that is connected to the profile picture, profile image, right? And when you decode that to be a snowflake ID, you get a timestamp that is like the 1st of February 2019. And it gives us a timestamp as well in UTC, so we know exactly when that person joined with on Twitter. Okay, and I think this is cool. I think it's really cool. Things that I didn't look into because we just didn't have the time. There are other formats as well. There are ULIDs, KSUIDs, UUID V1, V7, V6. They have different precisions. They sit in places that I haven't been able to look into because I ran out of time to prepare this slide, which I built this slide this morning. Right? So there's things to play here. There's a lot of things to play with here. And if someone wants to investigate this, I think it's a great thing to look into. Okay, so now let's talk more action. Right? So when did this thing start? Well, I have this playpen that I play with because I haven't coded properly in quite a while. And I asked someone, hey, code this thing up for me. And they said, dude, that's not what we do anymore. These days we vibe code. And so with a lot of hand waving and things, I built the first version of this. And then I said, well, actually, what we should do is we should have it within an extension. And the reason why we want to have it in a browser extension is because it then has access to the page that you're on. And maybe that page isn't visible from a server on the outside, right? You understand what I'm saying? Like I could be logged into Twitter. And when I logged into Twitter, the server that's asking for this wouldn't have access to this page, but in the extension, I have the source of the page, right? It's right there, right? And so we build it, and there's version 1, version 2. And then literally 5 days ago, I said, dude, we got to build this thing into Ubiquitron, right? We got to put it into Ubiquitron because it's really cool. And we got to do the entire implementation in JavaScript. And that's what we did, right, in the last 5 days. And if you look, if someone's using Ubiquitron, you'll see there was a release this morning of version 1.1.3, which we just pushed and said, okay, well, let's just see what it looks like. So it's still kind of in progress. It doesn't make any external calls. It's all in JavaScript, all runs within your browser. So I think it's pretty cool, and I want to show you what it looks like, right? So we released version 1.1 earlier this week. So it was kind of like a push to get this stuff done. We've done really cool stuff within version 1.1 as well. Did image enrichment, SHA-1 hash, and we released, like I said, version 1.1.3 today, some hours ago. And it's got this temporal view from the source, very much work in progress. So with that, I'm going to go and show it to you. So remember we had this thing. In what sequence did these people join? So now we're going to hope that the demo gods are with me. and I'm going to find that page. Hang on. I'm going to find this page where I have my demos. I have the URL here. Okay. So, and I'm going to open that up right here. Okay, so if you're using Ubiquitron, you'll notice we've got this little side thing at the side. I'm not here to sell you on Ubiquitron. I'm here to tell you about the cool stuff we've made in the last couple of weeks. But here's the list of people, right? We can load a couple more. Let's load a little bit more. So let's say we want to see where these people joined, right? And we want to do temporal analysis of this page. So we click on this thing over at the top, which brings up the side panel, right? This is the normal Ubiquitron side panel. We can see all the names here. And we, if you wanted to run things on here, you'd run all your different enrichment things in here, but we're not there for this. We're here for the source, right? So when you click on the source, now it's looking at the source itself, and we're going to say analyze this page, and there it's done, right? And so now it starts by the most recent thing that it got, and it can tell you that this number, you see this number, remember we talked about the epoch thing, is a JPEG. It shows you it's this JPEG. It decodes this. It says it's epoch, decodes this thing, and it tells you it was a Friday and it was this time. And that's all UTC times. And so as we scroll down, you could see this was December 24, 10th, 20th of December, 4th of December, 1st of November. It goes all the way back to, I don't know, when does it go back to? It goes all to the 20th of May, 2017. Now, what's interesting about this, you could see that this is almost the same time, right? Hang on, these ones are almost the same time, because it means that like the bulk of these people were uploaded on the 20th of May 2017. And then as people joined in, they were uploaded to this page as well. And because the CMS that they're using is date stamping the pictures with a Unix timestamp, we could just decode it and then it looks like this. And I think this is cool. Okay, I think it's cool. Let's look at another example. I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to take this one. It's a little bit more ugly in terms of its decoding. And I'm going to go to the top, right? This is what it looks like. And I'm going to say, okay, analyze this page. And there's a lot of stuff on this page. So every time that this page was edited or changed, there's a timestamp within the page. So see, then it doesn't always finish because time's out. And so there's a ton of information that sits on this page. I'm just going to try one more time. One more time. Come. You can do it. There we go. So now you can see that this is in the JSON. There's tons of stuff in the JSON, but every now and again, there we go. There's a picture, 2506, so June 2025. And then there's more changes on the 17th of December, more changes there, more changes there. And if we go all the way down, here you start seeing when the other people were put in here, right? So all of this is like when the page was changed. Every time they edited this page, their CMS inserted a line in here that showed, that put in a line that says updated this time. So you can see exactly when they changed this page. You can't see what they did, of course. For that, you got to hope you find something on the Wayback Machine. But I think you understand what the plan is here, right? So, okay, so let's look at another page. Let's look at the about page for. I've got a couple of examples. Let's look at the about page for Temmingh. All right, so that's going to load. Again, if you want to get to this, you wait for this thing to load, right? We wait for this thing to load. It only inserts when it's done. You click here on the side panel, right? you go to source and you say, analyze the page. And now, in this case, I know that there's EXIF information within these pictures. Remember we saw that? So you could see here, epoch, that's when the thing was edited. There's actually text as well. And there you see, it says image EXIF. And it says create date, modified date, metadata date, right? So that's actually when this page was created, right? So it's interesting because you'll see in the upload that it says 11th of November 2023, right? But if we want to know exactly what date, we could look at the EXIF information and we can kind of see, well, the page, this image was modified, right, on the 8th of November because of this. And so that kind of correlates with the date that we're seeing here, right? And so this is how we can put this whole thing together. And like literally, when you look at the bottom here, this is clearly wrong, right? Sometimes it gets it wrong because it's like things that it pauses that's not part of it. But this, the logo was on 2019 that it was created. And I can tell you that's when we created these things, when we started creating this page. So it gives us a really nice way of timestamping pages. I want to show you one more, right? So let's look at Ubicron, like the current page, right? So the current page on Ubicron, now we're going to load it up. That's what it looks like. You see, there's Ubicron, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to say, analyze this thing, right? And what's really cool about this, so this is now extracted from the object IDs. Remember I told you the Mongo IDs, this gets extracted from there. And so I can tell you that these photos come from testimonials. You see these little photos over there? That's the testimonials. So you see this guy's the first testimonial. Stewart is the second one. And I can see actually when I put these images up, so I can kind of see when I got these testimonials, which is information that, you know, you didn't have beforehand. So I can literally see who was first to give a testimonial and how basically this page was constructed by decoding these object IDs within here. And it's nice because I have it right here on the side, so I can basically get a context of where this thing is immediately. Like, where does this page come from? Where does the image come from? Well, you know, it's one of these ones. This image was created, right? Was uploaded on this time. And again, it's kind of difficult to determine in terms of like, oh, it was uploaded this time, was it created this time? Remember the question that we said, it's kind of hard to determine what exactly it is that makes this thing change. But for sure, we know that something happened on this time, right? And so, yeah, so I think this is really cool. So remember this, what sequences did people join? We can actually know what sequence these people join. That's the talk. Look at the time. Hey, look at that time. And if you have any questions, if you want to know more about Ubicron, of course, I would love to tell you about it. It is, I think, a fantastic tool for OSINT. And we are, like you can see, developing on this pretty hardcore. We've got a LinkedIn page. You can send us mail. This is available now. So it's literally available right now. You could just install the, you can go here to install, right? And then you can click on the Chrome extension, which is free. And then you can do this. Oh, I wanted to show you this. On Twitter, because now I'm logged in, right? So if I go, for instance, on Twitter and I say, let's go to notifications, right? And here's like this. And we see, for instance, let's say someone followed me. This profile was created when? September 2025, right? So if I want to see when, 2025, I can go to source, I can analyze this page, and I can see that it was on the 17th of September that it was created. And I think this is spectacular, you know. In this case, it was because of JSON information that sits here, but it could have been a Snowflake ID as well. There we go. Again, ubicron.com, you can have it, grab it all there, and you can play with it. That's my presentation. Now, I guess we're going to do questions. I don't know. Do we do questions? No?
Hello, am I audible? So we have already selected the questions from the comments, so you can see them under the comment section in the stat section, like all the questions that Andy has asked. So it will be easy for you to answer.
Let me go there quickly. I've got an extra screen for this thing. There we go. Comment. Oh, I'm sure there's going to be lots. Okay, sure. Where are we? We're going to take it from the bottom. Interesting. Well, what are you doing to protect users from browser extension exploit and manipulation? That's not. I'm not doing anything about that. I don't know. I don't see more comments here. Do we want to put more comments in there? Are there more that I need to address?
You can see them in start, on one side there is a like button and on the right side.
Sorry. Okay, so let's take it from, where do we take it from? From the top. Do you handle tampering or obfuscation cases where actors deliberately manipulate? No, I don't. No. Of course, you can do that. Of course you can. You can obfuscate, you can try to change it. Absolutely, you can do that. Can timestamping be done retrospectively, for example, on content that was never archived, but may have left indirect traces online? Yes, exactly in this way that we showed you. So it might have been not archived, right? But it still contains like the timestamps when it was made. So yes. How can timestamp analysis support attribution or chain of evidence validation in digital investigation? So interesting. Like, I'm not sure that this, this is mostly for intelligence and not so much for saying, well, is it evidence that this thing was made in this time? When you look at the first question, right, you'll see that it can be tampered with. So I would not use it for evidence. I would totally use it for intelligence, right? Okay, will we get any student discount at Ubicron? It's free. So yes, you will get it. You will get a discount. For you, it will be free. Look, how do we make our money? We sell servers. So when you want to have your own server that you run internal to your organization, then we can talk, right? But if you're a student, you could use the free version for free. You can use it for free. So I can't give you more discount. I'm not going to pay you, right? What's the biggest misconception that people have about OSINT today? I'm going to pause on that one. We're going to get back to that one. You've been shaping the OSINT space for years. Thanks. From Multigo to Ubicron, your work has defined how investigations evolve. What advice or suggestion would you give to new generation of OSINT professionals who are just starting out? Okay, so this is a good one. You know that when I started playing with this stuff, I had a thing that parsed WordPress dates from URLs, and I thought it was kind of cool. But as soon as you start pulling on that thread and you go, this is interesting, let me implement this and see how it works, and then start looking at more things, and then, you pull out more things. And so what I would tell you what to do is build stuff and investigate it and research it, and before you know, you have cool stuff. I think this is cool stuff, and I wasn't really planning on doing this. So just do something, and you will find that once you start doing things, things happen. They say get out the house, because when you get out the house, things start happening. Thanks for the kind words. Well, when websites strip metadata or change content dynamically via JavaScript, how can we still infer accurate first seen timestamp? Well, okay, so you say there's a couple of things to unpack there. When they strip metadata, they strip metadata out of pictures, for instance, and you're right, then you can't see. I can give you an example of a page. I'm still sharing, right? So there's a page, I have it specifically in my demo, right? A URL. I'm going to pick this one. Okay. And I'm going to fire this thing up here. And I'll put it in here, right? And this is just a page that I saw, when I tested the tool. Okay. Right. And I'm going to fire it up. I'm going to go to source. I'm going to say analyze. And there's literally nothing on here. There's no timestamp data on this page. Nothing. You would run it again. There's just nothing in here. And you can view the source and it's just, there's nothing there. So of course, yeah, you can have pages that have nothing on them. It's not to say that everything can be date stamped. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? Of course, what I would do with this is I would look this up on archive.org. I would look it up on crt.sh. I would look it up on, I would look at the domain, when was the domain registered. Those things you can't remove, right? You can't remove them. So it's going to be there, right? And we actually have within the tool things that look into that as well. So I can show you if I can. No, I can't show you. Okay, so I'm not going to show you. It's just can't show you now. There's no time. When attackers are aware of timestamping techniques, okay. In case where attackers are aware of timestamping techniques and deliberately manipulate metadata, how can investigators still establish reliable timeframes? So what you need to understand with this as well is that it's kind of difficult if I'm using Webflow, right, to mess with timestamp, because it's not me that's putting that timestamp in there. It's Webflow when I'm actually publishing the site that are creating those object IDs. So if the site is built by, let's say, someone that's using Webflow, then they can't mess with those. They can't mess with the object IDs, right? Because it's not under their control. But if it's a handcrafted site that they build by hand, of course they can. Of course they can change it. And they can make it look like that. But think about it. Now they're going to have an object ID in there that points to somewhere else, right? Which they then have to serve. It's a lot of work to do that. You can do it, but it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort to fake that, right? Okay, wait, there's many questions that's coming through. Attackers aware. Could AI-generated images become a major challenge? In terms of what? In terms of like, well, I guess, yeah. But I don't exactly know. For timestamping, I don't know. I don't know if the AI tools put metadata within the images. It'd be interesting to look into. Okay. Hi, RT, Diego. Some quick question. How does Ubiquitron deal with different time zones and clock drift? Does it sync captures to NTP or trusted clock? No, it decodes the thing. So it just decodes that, right? In terms of the temporal view, it just decodes the thing, and those times are all UTC, right? So if let's say it's an epoch time, right, and that epoch time is something, and remember who creates that, the CDN or the CMS creates that timestamp. So you are questioning if the CMS has clock drift, not the decoding tool, right? Because the decoding tool is just decoding the number. Okay, what if metadata is saved within each capture? Are those fields signed or tamper protected? No, we just decoding it, right? What are you doing to protect users from browser extension exploit? Nothing. No, that's not what we do here. Could machine learning models be trained to detect unnatural timestamp patterns or forge time metadata? I see this is a question. The forge metadata stuff is a question here. And remember, when you're thinking of the metadata that is forged, you're literally thinking of stuff that sits in image EXIF, right? And that can be forged. For sure, that can be forged because anyone can edit that, right? But when we're talking about paths and URLs and we're talking about the JSON stuff, You can still forge it. You can, like I said, you can forge it, but it becomes kind of tricky. It becomes a lot of effort. Can AI tools be made to pick it up? I guess, yeah, I guess. Because if there's such a big difference between different components, then it's hard to believe that you would create a thing and 10 years later put it on the internet. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Okay. What OSINT book can you recommend? I don't know. I don't know. No, I can't answer that. What would you work on to encourage others to learn from what you already know? What would you work on to encourage? What would you work on to encourage others to learn from what you've already known? But I don't really understand the question. What would you work on to encourage others to learn from what you already know? I would build tools. I love building tools. So then you really understand how it works as well, right? When you build a thing like this, you really understand how things sit together, right? And there's no more excuse that you can't build the tools. You can vibe code them, right? That's what I did. It helps if you can develop, but you can build it with AI. And then, hey, you have an application, you can ask. I've asked ChatGPT such a lot of questions about this stuff that I'm like, how does this decode? How does this work? And it's amazing. It just gives me all the answers. And then I take that answer literally into Windsurf and I'm like, vibe code this thing. Of course, the stuff that you see in Ubiquitron now isn't like I said, I did a POC for this and then I moved it to the developers. Of course, they hate me because I can code it quick and they have to now code it nicely. So that's kind of how we go. But the thing is, when you build a tool that does something, you really understand the ins and outs of it. So I hope that answers your question. Can the websites detect you using Ubiquitron extension on their platform? That's a good question. I like that question. In the extension for this temporal view, specifically for this temporal view, when you use the extension like this, they can't, because when you browse the site, right, with your browser, and you get the source, and then the extension looks at that source. So it means there's no ways that it's fetching it again. So it's very difficult to get that. You wouldn't be able to fingerprint it, because it's also the user agent. Everything would be exactly the browser's user agent. So I don't think they can. I think it would be difficult. Okay. You see a feature where browser extensions or crawlers automatically embed verifiable terms and capture during collection. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I haven't seen a lot of people do this thing that we've done. And I think it's tricky to do it right because there's lots of different ways to get the information. And you get a lot of false positives as well. You get a lot of things that, this is from the platform. The platform has an icon or a thing. And now that icon gets timestamped, and this is now inside of this history of the page, and the user never did anything with it, so it doesn't give any indication of when the page was created. So a lot of the results that you get from this temporal analysis need to be seen in context with the rest of the page. For instance, with that person that followed me, when they joined, I need the context of seeing, it's in this month. So when it gets automatically put into the thing, I mean, maybe, but like, I think we need to be careful of putting too much evidence-based stuff in there. Someone else asked about it as well. And so I think we need to be careful to be like, it is absolutely at this time. Because it can be manipulated, could be wrong, but it's good for intelligence. It's good for saying, we think this was created at this time, because we have timestamped some of the artifacts that tells us that this thing, it was created in this time. So I hope that answers that question. There's more questions. Hang on. I think there's more. I need to scroll down. I've been building some tools myself as a developer, but I keep wondering how much we should trust third-party components, especially ones that feel kind of vibe coded. Do you think about the trade-offs between using more tools and keeping things accurate? Dude, so my feeling on that is, Yes, you cannot. Like today, it happened today. I mean, I can probably still show you the screenshot, right? Where I saw something. This morning, I was still building on this thing, and we were debugging some stuff, and there was an object ID, and I was like, this doesn't look right according to what I see. So I asked ChatGPT to decode the object ID, and got it wrong. It got it completely wrong. And so obviously you need to verify the stuff with AI, but you can move really quickly and then go, does this look right? Yes, it looks right. Okay, we can move on. So I hope that answers that question. I see the lights, because you know what? It's getting dark here in South Africa. It's now 6:15. So the light on this camera has faded over time. I think we have time do we have time for one more question? I don't know if we can. Or if we're done, we're just done. Anyone? I think everybody's left.
Yeah. Thank you for joining. That was really an amazing